Squares and square roots. Our objective for this lesson is to find and use squares and square roots. Okay? Have you ever wondered how far you can see out from an airplane? Or from the top of a hill? How far can you see depends on the curvature of the earth and your height above it. Okay? There is a formula that will help you estimate how far you can see. The formula states that the view in miles V equals 1.22 times the square root of the altitude in feet A. Okay? And when you talk about the formula V equals 1.22 times square root of A, this is a good example of how squares and square roots are used. Okay? Lucia is riding in a hot air balloon about 158 feet above the ground. She looks off to the horizon and can just see her school in a distance. But how far away is she from the school? We will solve this in example 4. Okay? And if you notice, this is where Lucia is. Okay? Lucia is riding in this hot air balloon right here. Okay? And it's 158 above the ground. We want to find out how far she can see if she's on that balloon. Okay, and we will solve this in example 4. But before we do that, let's consider or let's find out what a square root is. Okay, when you talk about square root, a square root is one of two equal factors of a number. For example, the square root of 49 is 7, since 7 times 7 or 7 squared is 49. We will discuss later on why it's called a square root. Okay, right now let's talk about the definition. Again, one of two equal factors of a number. The square root of 49 is 7 because if you multiply 7, okay, with the same factor 7, it'll give you 49. It is also true that negative 7 times negative 7, rules of integers, a negative times a negative will give you a positive. So therefore negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. So negative 7 is another square root of 49. That is the reason why it has two square roots, 7 and negative 7. Because if you square negative 7, it'll give you 49. If you square 7, it'll also give you 49. Okay? Move on to the definition. In words, the square root of a number is one of two equal factors. In symbols, if x squared or x's second power equals y, then x is the square root of y. This is a definition of what square root is. The symbol that looks something like this is called a radical sign. The square root symbol is called the radical sign. It is used to indicate a non-negative square root, meaning to say whatever this symbol represents something that is always positive. Okay, a non-negative square root or 0. So when you say the square root of 49, by the way, when you say the square root of 49, you can also read this as radical 49. Since this is a radical sign, this is read as radical 49. So radical 49 indicates the non-negative square root of 49 is 7. Okay? So when the number is inside the radical sign, okay, it is always positive. Okay? Even though 49 has two square roots, 7 and negative 7, when it is now under the radical sign, it is simply 7. Okay? Another one is the negative radical 49 indicates the negative square root of 49. Simply put, just imagine that you are multiplying radical 49 with negative 1. If you multiply this with negative 1, okay, times radical 49, you end up with, again, simply, okay, let me get that before it disappears. There you go. Okay, so if I multiply that negative 1 with radical 49, end up with negative 7. So that's one way of remembering that how it's a negative. Okay, let me draw that so it won't disappear. So I have negative 1, and I multiply that with 49. Okay, we know that radical 49 will give you 7. So we have right there. And if I multiply that with negative 1, okay, it'll give me negative 7. Because negative 1 times 7 will give me negative 7. Okay? Let's go on to the next one. Let's consider these examples. Find the square root of radical 25. Okay, radical 25 represents the non-negative square root of 25. Again, it is emphasizing the non-negative square root. So that means only positive or 0. Since 5 times 5 equals 25, radical 25 is nothing more than 5. Okay? Let's look at example B, 1b. And if you look at, we want to find the negative square root of, or negative radical 64. Okay? And negative radical 64 represents the negative square root of 64. Okay? Because of that negative sign. So since 8 times 8 equals 64, negative radical 64 is simply negative 8. Okay? Okay, next. Now, consider this concept. Squaring a number and finding the square root of a number are closely related to a square. Remember, we talked about at the beginning that we will find out why it's called a square root. Okay, let's look at this one. The square shown at the right has sides that are 6 meters long. The area of the square is found by squaring 6. If you know the area of the square is 36 square meters, then the length of each side is found by finding the square root of 36. What is it saying? It's simply saying that both sides are 6 meters. Okay? And from what we learned, to find the area of a square, the area of a square is s raised to the second power, or s squared. So that means when you multiply this two, the area becomes 36 square meters. Okay? So if that's 36 square meters, 6 and 6 form a square. Okay? And the root of that square, or one side of that square, is 6. And that's why it's called a square root. Because the 6 and the 6 right here becomes the dimensions of your square to create the area, which is 36 square meters. Okay? Okay, let's see how this works now in this problem. Let's say you have the area, okay, of a square is 100 square inches. We want to find its perimeter. So this is your square right here, okay, and its area is 100 square inches. Let's find its perimeter. What is being assumed in this problem? It is being assumed that we know what the formula for area is, and we know what the formula for perimeter of a square. Okay, the area of a square, perimeter of a square. It is assumed that we know how to find the formula, or we know what the formula is. Okay, R for area and perimeter. Okay, so we start off with the length of each side. So how do we find the length of each side? We know that the area is 100 square inches, and we also know that area of a square equals s squared. Okay, so that means, okay, that if area is 100, we simply substituted the 100 to a equals s squared. Okay, what numbers s, when multiplied by itself, give you 100? Both 10 and negative 10, when multiplied by themselves, okay, are 100. Okay, now the problem is, since length cannot be negative, there is no such thing as a negative length. S must be equal to 10. Okay, the length of each side now is 10 inches. By knowing the formula for area, we can find the length of each side. This now becomes 10 for each side. Okay, 10 inches. Okay. Okay. So after we find the length of each side, we can now find the perimeter. It's also assumed that we know the formula for perimeter. And the formula for perimeter is 4 times S. Okay? And since we know what S is, which is 10 inches, we simply substitute 10 to S, and we now have 4 times 10. So the perimeter of our square is 40 inches. And that's how you use the area to be able to find the perimeter of your square. Okay? Numbers like 25, 49, 64 are called perfect squares because when you take the square root, you get an answer that is a whole number. What if the number is not a perfect square? How do you find the square root like 125? Before we answer this question, okay, the first square number is 1. Why is it 1? Because 1 times 1 equals 1. What's the next square number after 1? It is 4. Because 2 times 2 equals 4. Next square number after 4 is 9. Because 3 times 3 equals 9. Next square number after 9 is 16. Because 4 times 4 equals 16. The next one will be 25 because of 5 times 5 equals 25. And so on and so forth. Okay? You need to understand what square numbers are. Because in knowing square numbers, you are able to determine or estimate, okay, the square root of like a number which is 125, which is not a perfect square. Okay, how do we do that? First, let's list some square numbers that are close to 125. 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, so 100 is a square number. 121 is a square number. And 144 is another square number. So if you notice, 121 and 144, okay, basically sandwich 125, meaning 121 is less than 125 and 144 is greater than 125. So 125 is in between 121 and 124. So number 125 is not a square number. We know that. So it has no square root. That is a whole number. However, we know that it is greater than 121 and less than 144. Thus the square root of 125 should be greater than 11 and less than 12. Why greater than 11? Because the square root of 121 is 11 and the square root of 144 is 12. Okay? So it should be in between 11 and 12. Okay? Now how do you know which is which? We know that the square root of 125 is greater than 121 but less than 144. But if you notice, 125 is closer to 121 right there. It's a lot closer to 121 than 144. So what does that mean? It simply means that the closest estimate, okay, to the square root of 125 is 11. So the closest integer estimate, the closest whole number estimate would be 11 for 125, or square root of 125. Okay? Again, how do we use this? Okay, let's look at this scenario. Find the best integer estimate for each square root. We want to find radical 59, the square root of 59, or radical 59. First, 49 and 64 are the closest perfect squares, meaning to say 59 is in between 49 and 64. And we know for a fact that the square root of 49 And the square root of 64, the square root of 49 is 7. The square root of 64 is 8. Okay, so radical 59 is in between 7 and 8. And if you notice, 59 is a lot closer to 64 than 49. And therefore, the best integer estimate is 8, because it's closer to 64, and the square root or radical 64 is simply 8. Okay? Let's consider the next example, negative radical 38. You have negative radical 38. Again, the two square numbers, okay, where 38 lie are 36 and 49. The perfect square is closest to 38. And if you notice, negative radical 38 will lie between negative radical 49 and negative radical 36. Remember, it's a negative number. Okay, so as you go to the right, the number becomes greater. Okay, before we go there, you now have 49 is 7 squared, 36 is 6 squared, and the square root of negative radical 49 is negative 7. The square root of negative radical 36 is negative 6. And negative 38 lies in between them. The negative radical 38 lies between them. And we know that 38 or 36 is closer to 38 than 49. So the best integer estimate is 6. Okay? Because we know that this one is closer to 36 than to 49. So this is our best integer estimate. Okay? Negative 6. So let's go back to the beginning of the lesson and let's answer what we started. Okay? How far away is Lucia from the school? Remember Lucia's problem. She's in a hot air balloon and she is 158 feet above the ground. We also know that she can see her school in a distance. We want to find out how far she is from the school. Okay? Find the distance she is from the school. We use a formula that was given at the beginning, which is V equals 1.22 times radical A. Substitute values into the formula. You end up V equals 1.22 times radical A, or 1.22 times radical 158. Use our calculator. We end up with this value, 15.335162. So Lucia is around 15.3 miles from the school. And this is a perfect example how you use square roots in real life. Okay? And from here, we do our summary, okay, responding to the objective, and write a question that you may want to ask about. Okay? And that's it. Thank you.